is going. Welcome to the Legend of Jazz, Rebirth of the Cool. What's wrong with jazz today? Is jazz still a popular art? Where was jazz in the past and where is jazz going in the future? These are broad questions that can be discussed in numerous ways. So let's look at the aforementioned four questions only. What's wrong with jazz today? Jazz in its current form is still popular with musicians, but there's a definite disconnection with the youth group growing up today. Now, I'm not saying that there's not amazing things happening in the world of jazz today, even with the 30 and under crowd. Yet the scene today differs vastly from the times of Dizzy and Bird or Miles Davis and Coltrane. Look, there have been drastic budget cuts in school music programs. Plus, there are a few things that have changed since jazz traveled through its initial inception during the 1900s and growing rapidly through the 1930s. For instance, take your two largest influences in the jazz realm that have been playing since at least the 80s and trace them back. It's more than likely that they have played together at least one occasion, but more unlikely to have completed projects together. Collaboration and mentorship were the building blocks of jazz as a form of popular music, and moreover, nurtured the very essence of the hip-hop scene today. You go to any hip-hop concert now and you can expect Lil Wayne to bring out Rick Ross or Meek Mill to bring out Wale. There is a sense of community on stage all the way up through the biggest rappers on the scene today. Remember Eminem and Jay-Z working Yankee Stadium? The best in the game are out rapping with each other on a regular basis. It seems as if jazz musicians today are more interested in defining themselves through solo projects, something that's duly inspirational, but in some ways disappointing. It's great for everyone to have their own quintet or experience, but give us something to tell our friends about. Aside from a few exceptions, you can't regularly expect to go to a concert at the Blue Note or Village Vanguard Club in New York City and see a Chris Bodie walk through the crowd and on stage to join his friend for a set. It doesn't have to be a jam session for there to be spontaneity. Jazz has become too proper and in some ways selfish almost. For better or worse, jazz has lost its gritty edge that made people like Charlie Parker and Miles Davis our heroes. Research and listen to these great collaborations in hopes that we see projects like these again from our now generation jazz artists. Return to Forever, Romantic Warrior, Chick Corea, Stanley Clarke, Lenny White, and Al Di Meola, A Night in Tunisia, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, They Can't Take That Away From Me, Ella Fitzgerald with Louis Armstrong, In a Sentimental Mood, Duke Ellington and John Coltrane, one of my all-time favorites, Sanctuary, Spanish Key, Miles Davis, Chick Corea, Gary Bartz, Keith Jarrett, Dave Holland, Jack DeJohnette, Ario Mariara, the Miles Davis Quintet, Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Wayne Shorter, and Tony Williams, just to name a few. Is jazz still popular? Absolutely. In my humble opinion, jazz will never die. It is more likely that you will see jazz played in larger cities or on larger college campuses because the audience is more defined as opposed to massive audiences for pop or rap groups. But jazz is played by many truly talented musicians and is not an easy form of music to play. Jazz is improvisational and you have to be good and know what you're doing. Jazz is alive and well and still loved by many. Here's a list of a few young lion jazz artists of today. James Carter, Benny Golson, Stephon Harris, T.K. Blue, and Ravi Coltrane, who is the son of saxophonist John Coltrane and jazz pianist Alice Coltrane. You can find more of these young lion jazz artists online for purchase or listen to them on YouTube. Where was jazz in the past? Jazz is a lively musical style that originated at the beginning of the 20th century within the African American communities of the southern United States. Its roots lie in the African American adoption of European harmony, which formed to existing African musical elements. African musical influences are evidenced in the use of blue notes, improvisation, polyrhythms, syncopation, and swing notes. From its early development until the present day, jazz incorporated elements from American popular music. As the music developed and spread around the world, it affected many different national, regional, and local musical cultures. Since its early 20th century American inception, there are many distinctive styles, such as New Orleans jazz, dating from the early 1910s, big band swing, Kansas City jazz, and gypsy jazz from the 1930s and 1940s. Bebop from the mid-1940s and on down through West Coast jazz, cool jazz, avant-garde jazz, Afro-Cuban jazz, modal jazz, free jazz, Latin jazz in various forms, soul jazz, jazz fusion, and rock jazz, smooth jazz, jazz funk, punk jazz, acid jazz, Atheno jazz, jazz rap, cyber jazz, Indo jazz, M-bass, new jazz, and other ways of playing the music. In a 1988 interview, trombonist J.J. Johnson said, and I quote, "Jazz is restless. It won't stay put and never will," end quote. Where's jazz going in the future? When we ponder the future of this thing called jazz, one thing is certain, it will survive. So I leave you with quotes from some prominent jazz professionals. Miles Davis, trumpeter and composer, quote, "Whoever's playing now is the future. Jazz is nothing if nobody's doing it," end quote. Keith Jarrett, pianist and composer, says, "I see the future of jazz musicians being actors, imitating other styles, playing roles, not looking for their own truths, not even remembering what jazz is really about." Herbie Hancock, pianist and composer, offers, "I continue to be optimistic about the future of jazz, but when times are not that good, jazz just goes underground and still functions and weathers the storm." Billy Taylor, pianist and composer, has the final word. "Jazz has already found its place as the music of the 20th century, so everybody in the 21st century is going to be using it as a basis for whatever is coming in that century." In closing, I would like to say, somebody came up with the word jazz, and now we're eating it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If we're truly jazz people, it's just a word, and I'm not sure if anyone has ever defined it, and that's because it doesn't exist unless it's happening. Everybody, somebody still wants to play jazz all around the world. So when you ponder the future of this thing called jazz, one thing is certain, it will survive. As Grammy award-winning jazz drummer Art Blakely loved to tell his audiences, "No America, no jazz." I'm Chrome C. Alexander, and this has been The Legend of Jazz, Rebirth of the Cool.